People doing extraordinary things to help others.
If he didn't do what he did, we would have died.
Heroic acts that have sometimes meant the difference between life and death.
And he was just crying, "Don't let me die, don't let me die, save me, save me."
Amazing acts of courage.
It was just a natural reaction. This guy needs help.
Captured on dash cams, CCTV, and mobile phones. Incredible stories from the UK.
He put his life at risk just to save me.
And across the world.
Mayday, mayday, mayday.
All the people that assisted with my rescues that day are my heroes.
We genuinely owe our lives to him.
Today on Saved on Camera. In South Africa, a couple on a mission to save rhinos end up needing to be saved themselves.
And I thought, I have no idea how we're going to get out of this.
They are over 200 kilometres from the nearest city and help. And even when rescue services do arrive, they are not going to find it easy.
Very concerned that for the rest of my life I would be known as the rescuer who bumped the aircraft off the cable and killed 2 people.
In the UK, a mum on the school run has a seizure at the wheel of her car.
Whilst I was seizing, my foot was pushed onto the accelerator.
Her 8-year-old son has taken over control, but he's out of his depth.
I didn't really want to steer the car, I just went for it.
It's the start of rush hour and they're in the fast lane, travelling at 65 miles an hour.
We soon noticed there's a lady in distress in there and a young boy hanging onto the steering wheel with fear in his eyes.
In Oklahoma, USA, a flash flood sees a woman lose control of her car, careering into a creek and trapping her underwater.
We didn't know if she could breathe, if she could get her seatbelt off, or if the pressure was too much on the doors to even open them.
She didn't have a whole lot of time. The water was rising in the creek. She needed help quick.
And in the UK, a wild deer is trapped by a rope. A trio of wildlife warriors are its only hope. They know time is against them.
From the point of capture to the point of release has to be less than 30 minutes. Otherwise, you're looking at a deer that is likely to have a heart attack and die on you.
A light aircraft is entangled in a zip line 100 metres in the air. The pilot and passenger are left dangling upside down, unable to escape.
And there was just oil and fuel dripping down on us.
If the plane dislodges, they will plummet to almost certain death.
You literally think that any second you're gonna fall and you're gonna die.
Peter Gadding is a 63-year-old commercial pilot from South Africa who's been flying planes for 32 years.
Oh, I've always just loved flying. My late father was a pilot. I just had it in my veins, eh? I just decided one day I needed to fly.
Peter's wife, Mary, is also a keen flying enthusiast.
We flew a lot together with the children and without them. We went on holidays together in a little plane. Peter is very responsible as a pilot. He doesn't take chances at all. He's just a really good pilot, yeah.
The pair are keen conservationists and volunteer for an anti-rhino poaching charity.
We have an organisation called the Battaliers. They were looking for volunteers to fly the anti-rhino poaching missions again. And so, without hesitation, Mary and I volunteered. Is just, it's a wonderful thing to be able to do that. I had done 3 various patrols before, accompanied by Mary. I'm controlling the aircraft and so on, and she's a second pair of eyes.
You look out the side and just see if you can find any rhino that are dead or alive, and look for poachers.
We're a team, just working together.
One day, the couple were out flying on an anti-poaching mission.
It was a normal patrol. It was a nice morning. The visibility was great. Well, we had pretty much finished flying the patrol. I was about to turn back. We'd been flying for a number of hours. I decided to change the route up a little bit.
But this change of plan proved to be pivotal.
Next thing, there was this almighty crash, which was so scary. It was just actually indescribable. The actual impact was just unbelievable. I'm getting all emotional.
The aircraft hit the zipline. It sort of sprung forward and then backwards. It was the most awful noise. And then we were bouncing, hanging upside down onto the zipline. And there was just oil and fuel and stuff dripping down on us. It was like just the most awful smell. And I thought, I have no idea how we're going to get out of this. I hadn't a clue what was going on. I mean, you just don't hit things in the air. After a few seconds, I remembered, oh my God, we've actually hit the zip line. Didn't think that there was going to be a chance of being rescued. I can't even describe how terrifying it was for Mary and I, hanging upside down like that. We just held each other's hands and just hung there. You literally think that any second you're gonna fall and you're gonna die.
My heart started pounding. I was actually worried that I was gonna have a heart attack. My thought straight after that was, we actually are going to die.
You know, all your blood is going to your head and out of your feet, and you're pretty much hanging on the seatbelt and you can't move because of fear of falling. The discomfort was nothing compared to the fear.
It was just literally like being in a nightmare, but being awake.
Later, saving the couple turned into a risky situation.
We approached fairly carefully. When I saw what was holding the aircraft up, the anxiety went up.
In the UK, a car captured on a dash cam during a busy rush hour is out of control. It's travelling at 65 miles per hour and is in danger of crashing into the central reservation.
Something was going on up ahead, saw a car veering from side to side.
Swerving about all over the road.
An 8-year-old boy is helpless inside, but he's not about to give up.
The car was shaking and my mum was shaking.
The ties that bind a mother to her son are notoriously strong. But for one Colchester family, it's a bond that ended up saving their lives.
My name is Lauren. I'm a special needs teacher. I live at home with my son Ben and my partner Joe. Ben is quite mature for his age, very in touch with his emotions. So we do have a close bond, and I do feel like he's more like my friend than he is my son.
Mum's hair's big in this one.
Who's?
The one he's about to fight.
She's funny. Sometimes annoying.
Ben absolutely loves playing video games. If he's not outside playing with his friends, he will be in his room playing video games, especially car video games. Those are his favourite.
Ben's love of car video games was to play a crucial role on one particular day.
Nothing felt out of the ordinary at all in terms of what I was feeling that day. Right, you ready? Let's go. After school had finished, I was just looking forward to getting home and getting dinner on.
She was happy, she was saying hello to me. She was just driving normally.
We were driving along a very busy A road at the time.
So how was school today?
The journey home from school to our house is roughly about 30 minutes. It does involve a lot of busy A roads. It can get quite scary, a lot of impatient drivers trying to get home. About 3:30, we were talking about our days. Again, nothing out of the ordinary.
But that soon changed as Ben started to notice his mum acting strangely.
I first realised something was different when she wasn't really listening to me. And she just wasn't listening to me. What are you doing to me? Mum!
In a van, just behind Lauren's car, were workmates Jimmy Dowsett and Billy Smith.
Me and Jimmy had been working on site all day and we was just on our way home.
So finishing the day, we're tired, it's December, so just wanted to get home to the family, really. The traffic was very busy that night. People coming home from work, people leaving school. I'd moved lane into the fast lane. A car started veering towards the central reservation.
Something was going terribly wrong inside the car.
The car was shaking, and my mum was shaking.
Apparently, I then suddenly started aggressively shaking, dribbling, and my eyes were closed. My hands were still tightly gripped on the steering wheel. Whilst I was seizing, my foot was pushed onto the accelerator.
The car started heading back over the other lanes.
I just assumed someone had fallen asleep at the wheel.
And I saw outside of the window that we're skidding against the walls.
Now travelling at 65 miles per hour, the car was dangerously out of control.
Apparently, Ben leant over me. He was sat on the handbrake so that he could reach over.
I didn't really want to steer the car. I just went for it.
He put the hazard lights on before he started steering the car.
It was quite difficult. It was very hard to steer it.
We soon noticed there's a lady in distress in there and a young boy hanging onto the steering wheel with fear in his eyes.
Yeah, we knew we had to do something.
Can't say I had a plan for stopping the car. I just decided that I needed to help see them off the road.
The car was weaving from side to side.
I kept looking around so I couldn't crash into anyone.
Pulled up alongside it so he wasn't putting any more danger on the road. If he'd let go of the steering wheel, could have veered back into the road and anything could have happened.
Obviously kept the van in a straight line and Ben done the same with the car and then we slowly edged it over.
If he hits my van, damages my van, it doesn't matter, does it? You just want that boy to be safe.
And then I steered the car onto the grass.
When they went up the verge, I was speaking to Billy and I said, what's happening? He said, right, they're up the verge, just pull up and stop.
And then it slowed down.
But it wasn't over yet.
She did stop and then she started again. I'm assuming she fell back onto the accelerator and started driving towards us again. I told Jimmy to accelerate because she's going to hit us.
And then she fainted.
Billy jumped out while the van was still moving.
I knew I had to stop the car. Ben was screaming to help his mum. And obviously she was still unconscious at this point, so we stopped the car.
I went round to the side Lauren was on. She was still out of it.
I just checked her airways were clear because her head was back. I checked she had a pulse and then phoned 999. I just remember it being really cold and Ben was freezing cold. Obviously I spoke to Ben for quite a long time. I was very, very worried about his mother.
The first thing I remember after waking up, Ben was next to me, looking quite distressed. There were just strangers around the car making a huge fuss.
It didn't take her long coming round. When she started to try and talk to us, very disorientated and didn't know what was going on and it wasn't making sense, wanted to drive off again. So we just had to calm her down and make sure the keys were out of the ignition.
She was really confused what was happening.
I was trying to piece together why we were suddenly on the side of the road, because to me it felt as if I just blinked for a split second.
The two men waited with Ben and his mum until the emergency services arrived and then left.
When I finally got the full story of what happened, it was when I was in the ambulance with Ben and the paramedics on the way to the hospital. I was so shocked. I mean, at first, when Ben told me, I actually laughed. I thought he was joking, and it wasn't until the paramedics actually confirmed that it was likely that I'd had a seizure, that I realised that I had just had a seizure at the wheel, driving 65 miles an hour down a busy road. After having multiple tests, the doctors strongly believed that the seizure was either stress-induced or it was due to medication I was taking at the time. Ben has been surprisingly humble about it. Paramedics genuinely believe that if he didn't do what he did, we would have either been seriously injured or we would have died.
Later, Ben and his mum meet up with the men who saved them for the first time.
The main reason I wanted to help was because when I pulled upside, I saw Ben, thought of my own son, thought of my own family, really.
Back in South Africa, an aerial rhino patrol has gone wrong. A couple in a small plane have accidentally flown into a zip wire, leaving them precariously balanced.
I can't even describe how terrifying it was for Mary and I, hanging upside down like that.
It was just literally like being in a nightmare, but being awake.
Despite the life-threatening situation, Peter manages to call for help.
Called up the anti-rhino poaching people and I said, look, we've hit something. I don't think I even realised it was the zipline at the time. And they raised the alarm.
Rob Thomas is a volunteer with the South African Mountain Rescue Team and is the one to take the call.
The message came in and it was a fairly brief message. It just said aircraft crash, power lines, Pilanesberg, stand by.
The rescue services are on their way. They're not going to find it easy.
The 2 helicopters came and that was horrible because, you don't know if you're going to get blown off the zip line.
We approached fairly carefully at the same altitude as the aircraft. We didn't ever want our downwash getting near it. Took a look and our primary concern was what is holding this aircraft in place. When I saw what was holding the aircraft up, the anxiety went up because the only thing holding the aircraft in place is there are 6 bolts or 8 bolts that bolt the propeller onto the flange that is mounted to the drive shaft. And one of those bolts was on the other side of the cable. That was all that was preventing them from coming off.
With their life hanging in the balance, Rob has some difficult choices to make.
If the aircraft did come off while we had somebody at the aircraft, first of all, we would kill whoever was there, but we'd also probably end up with our rescuer getting entangled in the aircraft, which would quite possibly pull the police helicopter out of the sky. So we rejected that option, which left the only real option being to come down the cable.
And that dangerous maneuver fell to Rob, sending him 500 meters down a cable to rescue them.
I don't think there was time for concern over my own safety. It was more a case of just trying to be methodical, trying to be calm.
We could actually see him coming down to us, and it just seemed to take forever.
In this case, speed is not your friend.
He did it very slowly and meticulously because he was also still concerned that if he was to make too many movements that it would also dislodge the aircraft.
I was very concerned that for the rest of my life I would be known as the rescuer who bumped the aircraft off the cable and killed 2 people. But at the same time I realized that that was the only way we could get it to happen. So it was a case of go ahead, do your best, be as careful as you can, and hope like mad and do a lot of praying.
But once Rob reaches the stricken pair, the next big question is, how is he going to get them out of the plane?
Well, the first thing he did was secure the aircraft to the zipline. Then we knew we were not going to fall off anymore. It was just a question of trying to extract us out of the aircraft without dislodging it either.
The first thing that the pilot said to me is, listen, don't take this the wrong way, but I'm really, really glad to see your face. The next thing he said to me is, please take my wife out first, which was a very noble sentiment, but I had to point out to him that he was between myself and his wife. And I didn't want her climbing over him if I could just get him out of the way first. So I simply said to him, sorry, bud, you're in my way. Here's a harness. Here's how you put it on. Get cracking.
With chivalry out of the window, it was time for Peter to get out.
He came out fairly quickly. It was obviously very difficult. If you imagine sitting in a garden chair and somebody pushes you over on your back, So you've got your feet in the air. I call it rocket launch position. So they'd been hanging in rocket launch position for a couple of hours. Once he had it on, he slowly climbed into the upright position and carefully stepped out of the aircraft.
Even though it was high up, hanging on that zip line, that was nothing compared to the fear of being in that aircraft for all that time.
But as Rob turned to save Mary, the weather was getting worse and fear was setting in.
I put my harness on, and which was not very easy in a tiny little plane, and you're trying not to move. And then I climbed over onto Peter's vacant seat.
She was halfway out and she said to me, "I'm stuck." And my initial thought was, you can't be stuck, you're climbing out of the aircraft. And I looked behind her, and the grab handle in the center of the back had managed to toggle itself on the throttle of the aircraft. So I leant over to untoggle her, and as I did that, my feet slipped off the wing strut. So I went upside down. She started to get a little bit anxious. All I said is, keep it together, you're almost out. It was literally a case of, she was probably 10 seconds away from being out of the aircraft. We got her out, we got them both onto the wing strut.
It was very high and so scary. The wind had come up, I still didn't feel safe at all. And then they started winching us very slowly. He first lowered Peter, and then he lowered me. I loved being lowered down onto the mountain, and then I knew that I was safe.
The touchdown moment on the ground was a revelation, partly because I discovered at that point that my feet and my legs didn't work anymore. I'd been hanging in harness for so long that I didn't actually have the strength to stand.
My sandals flew out the plane, so I had no shoes on. So Rob decided that I should be airlifted with the helicopter, and then Peter and Rob and the mountain rescue guys walked back, and they just put me in the ambulance and checked me out, and I was fine. My blood pressure was even normal.
There was just this enormous amount of relief. It was miraculous. We were very, very lucky.
The actual tension of that situation only hit me when I got home. It was only then that my brain started to process what I'd gone through.
Well, Rob is our hero, and actually all of them were absolutely wonderful, but Rob was the one who got us out.
I don't think there's any words that can describe the amount of respect and thankfulness that I have for all those people that were involved in the rescue operation.
The outcome could have been very different. Just the fact that they hit the wire and bounced back and dropped enough to catch on the back of the propeller. The fact that we got two people out of there was incredibly satisfying.
What started out as a positive expedition ended in a terrifying accident that could so easily have resulted in tragedy.
I think I'm maybe just a little more grateful to be alive. Yes, and have my wife in one piece and well.
More than anything, it's given me a bigger appreciation for life, because that was a miracle. I would love to do the anti-rhino poaching again. I would do it in a heartbeat.
Absolutely no reason why we wouldn't go and do more anti-rhino poaching patrols anytime that we are able to do that with pleasure. We'll be back.
In the UK, a wild deer has become trapped in the middle of the East Sussex countryside.
This poor deer that was quite clearly entangled in blue rope around its antlers.
A trio of wildlife warriors are its only hope, but any reckless release could be dangerous.
Getting hold of the head, the antlers, that is the most dangerous moment. You can then find yourself being kicked or stabbed with the antlers.
In the middle of East Sussex sits a rescue centre. It's a haven for injured wildlife, and it was set up in 1996 by animal lover Trevor Weeks. But his altruism started much earlier than that.
I've done this since I was a kid. I've always liked the countryside, I've always liked animals, and it's something that my parents have sort of instilled in me to respect nature and respect the countryside.
Kathy Martin joined the centre 11 years ago.
Trevor set it up on a small scale. I just sent him an email, just sort of said, you know, I'm available, you know, if I can help at all, then I'd love to, and so gradually got involved that way.
It's a labour of love for both of them.
We all work really, really well together. And when we've been able to get an animal back to full health and return it to the wild, then that gives you the most heartwarming feeling you can ever experience.
I think the thing with the wild animals, and with any animal really, is it can't help itself. It needs humans to help them. They can't say when they're ill, they can't say what they need, and it's down to us to assess them and to help them.
Now with a team of 150 volunteers, the centre routinely answers between 4,000 and 5,000 calls a year. One dramatic call-out, though, would end up capturing the nation.
Hello, Wildlife Rescue. I actually had a call first thing in the morning from a couple just outside of Blackboys, which is in the middle of East Sussex. And they said they could see a deer that was entangled. Its antlers were tangled in some rope attached to an old apple tree. I phoned my colleagues Kathy and Chris, and I asked them to basically bring our transit ambulance as well as all our entanglement rescue gear up to site.
The team had taken similar calls in the past, so knew the protocol that was required.
Any rescue like that has to be done by at least 3 people because of how dangerous and difficult they are to restrain and then cut free and release.
When we first got there, this poor deer that was quite clearly entangled in blue rope around its antlers.
Once we're all together on site, we all have a little team meeting to discuss how we're going to approach it and how we're going to cut it free and how we're going to release it.
But the team must be quick, or the results could be fatal.
Deer are very highly strung animals at the end of the day. They've got a lot of adrenaline naturally in their bodies, and as a result of that, when we pin them and secure them to the floor, they're going to get very, very stressed.
Do you want to go that side of that, mate?
That whole process, from the point of capture to the point of release, has to be less than 30 minutes. Otherwise, you're looking at a deer that is likely to have a heart attack and die on you.
His eyes are sort of staring them really wide, often they're drooling. You can see their chests heaving. They're just so exhausted from trying to free themselves that, you know, that's what motivates you to get in there and to get into a dangerous situation and actually deal with it as quickly as you can.
Yeah.
They needed to begin by minimising the deer's movement, slowing it down.
Normally in these situations we try to use like a walk towards net.
Yeah.
The walk towards net is almost like a tennis net, and we use that to try and corral the deer and encourage them to run into it. It gets them under control and gives us an opportunity then to get on top of them and to control them.
But there was a problem.
We spread the walk towards net around the outside of the apple tree, but it was almost pointless because we just couldn't get it where we needed it to be.
Yeah.
To stand any chance of releasing the deer, the team needed to find a way to subdue it without using a net.
Right.
And they suddenly got that chance.
Right.
At one point the deer sort of trips over and then falls, and it gave Chris the ideal opportunity to literally spring forward and pounce onto its shoulders.
And we managed to get its head covered. We use a pillowcase to cover their eyes because they tend to quieten right down once they're in darkness.
Getting that animal pinned down and getting hold of the head, the antlers, pinning the shoulders down, that is the most dangerous moment.
Net removed as well.
I dealt with a deer only a couple of days ago and found myself with some pretty horrendous marks on my arms as a result of it kicking out.
But the clock is ticking.
From the point of capture, we know we've got less than 30 minutes to get that animal released. As soon as Chris and I had full control over the deer, Kathy then comes in.
My role there was really to get that rope off as quickly as possible. You're just cutting it, hoping that it starts getting loose enough where you can work out how to get it free as quickly as possible.
For Trevor and his colleague Chris, who continued to hold the deer down. It's a hazardous part of the process.
In any rescue like that, when you jump onto the back of the deer, you're almost imitating what a predator would do. So at that point, the animal will quite often play dead. And they try to lull you into a false sense of security so that you loosen your grip, you loosen control, and then all of a sudden they will kick out and start panicking again and trying to get free. If you lose control of them, you can then find yourself being kicked or stabbed with the antlers.
It's a rescue with danger all along the way. Kathy must cut through the rope as quickly as she can, but they all need to stay alert.
The second most dangerous moment is actually the point of release.
After cutting most of the rope free, I could tell that there was one section left that was holding the deer tightly, so I let the others know that I was going to be cutting that last section.
We then have to remove the walk towards net, get that out of the way, and make sure the deer has then got a clear escape route. On this occasion, we were a little bit concerned because going straight forward, it would have to go through a hedge, across the lane, and then into another field.
The deer's going to feel that release of pressure and think it's free when obviously we've still got Chris sitting on its back.
But the team know they have to get this deer released, and now.
You're going right, I'm going right. Chris called 1, 2, 3 release. Chris and I would then release the deer at the same time.
As Chris jumped off the deer, he then pulls the head covering off, getting out the way as quickly as possible so that the deer can then jump off and hopefully run off into the distance.
He just jumped straight through the hedge, across the road, straight through the hedge the other side, and just legged it across the field. And that was really nice to see him do that, and so pleased. You couldn't have asked for better.
Even though they've done this type of rescue many times before, there's still a tidal wave of emotion after every successful release.
I think you can always hear that in our voices at the end of any deer release. It's almost sort of slightly hysterical. The emotion is just such a relief seeing them run off.
Being able to release a deer like that is amazing. It's probably one of the most amazing experiences you can do, to be honest. You know, you go from seeing how scared those eyes look to then that relief on their face when they're able to run away. And it is such a nice thing to experience. It's really heartwarming.
In America, a sudden downpour in Oklahoma is creating hazardous conditions.
I saw a car, all of a sudden they skidded in the rain and then went straight into a creek.
Emergency services were on their way, but time was critical.
She was under the water. The water was rising, and she needed help quick.
One eyewitness caught it all on camera.
Oh, gosh. My name is Kara Copes. I live here in Oklahoma. It was a spring day, and it had been raining, and it started just getting heavier and heavier. The radio was saying that it was a flash flood warning, and I noticed that the water was filling up on the sides of the road, and the ditches were starting to get a little tall.
Kara wasn't the only driver doing battle with the elements.
My name's John Johns. The weather was pretty bad. You could hardly see in front of you. There was water covering the roads, so you had to be really cautious.
Whether cautious or not, one driver was about to suffer the full force of the floods.
As I was driving home, I saw a car coming in the opposite direction toward me. All of a sudden, they skidded in the rain. I saw the water just start spraying, and then I saw her car start to slide. It flipped over right into the side of the road and was going upside down in the grass. And all of a sudden, it went right into this creek. So the car is now in the water, upside down. I immediately turned around and called 911. I could see other people getting out of their cars and rushing to the scene.
Heating engineer John wasn't far behind.
I was coming down the road, and I saw what looked like just a bunch of vehicles sitting on the side of the road with people standing, all looking towards the ditch. When you see the vehicle, immediately your heart kind of sinks. I asked, is somebody in the car?
Anybody in there? Yes.
And they said yes. The first thing that went through my mind was, they need help. And then I began to think, as a father, that's somebody's child. I couldn't imagine not doing something at that point.
I mean, she is underwater, probably in a seatbelt. Water is rising. She's upside down. We didn't know if she could breathe, if she could get her seatbelt off, or if the pressure was too much on the doors to even open them.
She didn't have a whole lot of time. The water was rising in the creek. She needed help quick.
By now, other drivers had joined the rescue.
There were lots of guys. Several had jumped in the water. They were yelling, talking about how they could get this car open. Should they break the glass? It was just so shocking.
John and the other rescuers were running out of time.
We've tried unlocking the doors, we've tried opening doors, and nothing's happening. The car was upside down. I couldn't see her. I just knew she was in there. I knew we had to get her out. It's not working. Nothing I'm doing is working. Part of you wants to give up. It's like you can't.
John and the others made another attempt.
We began rocking the vehicle back and forth, and the glass on the window broke. When the window broke, we knew the fight wasn't over at the same time because she still hadn't emerged. When she surfaced, when she come up out of the water, people on the grass all began to cheer.
Suddenly, we saw a man pulling her out, and we were just so relieved. I probably took the first deep breath since I had been there.
For John, though, there was still a job to do.
The battle wasn't even over. We still had to get her out of the water and to safety. The water is still high, water's still rising. We didn't know exactly how we were going to get her to safety.
But luckily for them, the emergency services had arrived.
It was such like a burden lifted off, knowing that somebody with professional training was going to be there to help.
She was a little cold and shivery, but I walked up and gave her a hug and told her, I'm so glad you're still with us. Nobody ever plans for something like that to happen.
Knowing someone's life in your hands is a feeling that can't be described. There's not words for it.
The actions of John and the other rescuers that day has had a lasting effect on Cara.
I feel like everyone who jumped in the water they're just all heroes. People just really caring for someone they didn't even know.
I'm not a hero. I was just doing the right thing at the right time. Not helping is not an option if you're able.
Earlier in the UK, we saw a mother saved by the quick actions of her 8-year-old son when she had a seizure at the wheel while travelling at 65 miles per hour on a busy road.
I knew something bad was happening when she wasn't steering the wheel.
Unconscious, but with her foot still firmly on the accelerator, it was down to Ben to try and steer them to safety.
I managed to reach the steering wheel and I managed to steer the car onto the grass.
In a vehicle behind, Jimmy and Billy saw what was happening and helped Ben manoeuvre the car to safety and alerted the emergency services.
We noticed there's a lady in distress in there.
Yeah, we knew we had to do something.
I mean, at first, when Ben told me, I actually laughed. I thought he was joking. And it wasn't until the paramedics actually confirmed that it was likely that I'd had a seizure that I realised that I had just had a seizure at the wheel, driving 65 miles an hour down a busy road. After having multiple tests, the doctors strongly believed that the seizure was either stress-induced or it was due to medication I was taking at the time. Ben has been surprisingly humble about it. Paramedics genuinely believe that if he didn't do what he did, we would have either been seriously injured or we would have died.
A year later, it's a big day for Ben and his mum, as they are meeting up with the men who helped to save them for the first time.
Hi Ben, all right?
Yeah.
Hi.
What did you guys see?
The first thing we saw was the car veering to the central reservation.
Okay.
So we've come up alongside you, realised there was something wrong, and saw Ben sort of hanging on to the steering wheel. So we sort of just tried to follow the car off the road, really.
Oh, thank you so much. It's quite distressing that I don't remember any of it. I think that's the worst part. I have no recollection of any of it. I can only go by what other people have told me, by looking at the dash cam footage. That's probably the worst part for me.
Please save my mummy, that's what he said.
Did he?
But positives have come out of the event.
A lot of our friends, when they found out what happened, they actually took the time to sit down with their children and tell them what to do if it ever happened to them.
Yeah.
So in a way, that's good as well.
Yeah, so something good come out of it.
Yeah, something good has definitely come out of it, yeah.
And Lauren and Ben now have the chance to thank them.
You're heroes too, really, because I think if you weren't there, he could have possibly been on the road even longer, and something else could have happened. So, you know, thank you so much.
The main reason I wanted to help was because when I pulled upside, I saw Ben, thought of my own son, thought of my own family, really.
A lot of people would have just driven past or just driven past slowly, had a look, oh, that looks bad, and then just carried on. So for you to actually stop and help Ben and stay with us until you knew that we were safe, thank you so much.
Thank you for saving me.
No problem, you're welcome.
You, mate.
Yeah, you done well, mate.
I think Ben's a real hero, to be honest. And his mum should be proud.
Hats off to Ben. His reaction, his courageousness, what he done is amazing.
I couldn't believe that Ben had done something like that. I mean, not a lot of adults would have acted in that way, let alone 8-year-old boys. Cheers! Cheers!
Yeah, it was really good to see them both again. To see Lauren well and see Ben smiling rather than crying. It was good.
Almost a year on, Ben's bond with his mum is even stronger.
I just wasn't thinking about anything else except from her. Now I think we have a bigger relationship with each other.
Rapid train number 5418 is behind schedule just outside Osaka, Japan. The driver is trying to make up lost time.
電車は予定より少々遅れております。次は尼崎です。
The train enters a curve at 116 kilometers an hour, 46 kilometers over the speed limit. Seconds later, it's airborne. Monday, the tail end of rush hour. For more than 650 passengers aboard rapid train number 5418, the morning commute ends in disaster. The train derails at more than 100 kilometers per hour and smashes into an apartment building in Amagasaki, 2 stations short of Osaka. It's hard to believe that anyone inside the first 2 carriages could have survived. But this man has. Shortly after the crash, Kyoichi Yoshida, a 39-year-old video engineer, regains consciousness.
目が覚めた時は、もう世界がなんか
When I woke up, the world in front of my eyes was foggy. It could be because I wasn't fully conscious.
まあその場所閉じ込められてた僕は閉じ込められた
I couldn't recognize the place I was trapped in. I mean, I saw a concrete ceiling above the window of the train, and I thought, what am I doing here? I couldn't recognize the situation. But I knew I was in a dangerous place.
分かんなかったので自分がその危険かどうかもよく分かんなかった
Yoshida was traveling in the lead carriage, which hit the apartment building with such force that it's now buried deep inside the basement parking garage. The first rescuers arrive at 9:24 a.m., just 6 minutes after the crash. Nothing could have prepared them for what they see inside the wreckage. Kyoichi Yoshida remembers the moments just before the crash. He was traveling to his work at a local TV station when the train suddenly shifted violently.
I was imagining the train would fall on its side. And while I was thinking about it, it actually started to happen. I was thrown to my right, toward the front of the train. Then I realized that I was facing backwards. I could see down toward the rear part of the train, and while I was falling, I was losing consciousness.
All around him, underneath him, are the bodies of strangers. Then he spots something familiar lying right on top of him.
And then when I looked at my chest, there was my laptop computer I'd been using just minutes before, hanging nicely right there in front of me.
Yoshida believes that the gap between the laptop and his chest may have saved his life, giving him just enough space to keep breathing. The news of Japan's worst rail disaster since 1963 hits the airwaves within minutes of the crash. Momoko Suzuki is at work when the news breaks. She's horrified by the report of numerous casualties, especially since her husband and her daughter Junko often ride that train.
この事故によって列車の1両目は完全に大破。しかしながら奇跡的にもその車両には生存者がいました。現在のところ事故での死者は2、30人と確認されています。
The rescuers soon realize that 20 to 30 dead is an optimistic prediction. In the first hour alone, they discovered dozens of bodies, most of them in the two front carriages. Hundreds of injured are taken to nearby hospitals, and many are still trapped in the depths of the wreckage. Kyoichi Yoshida has injuries from head to foot. A broken pelvis, broken ribs, severe whiplash. Even more serious, his legs are trapped in the wreckage. They're squeezed to the point where there's a danger of getting crush syndrome, a deadly condition that can set in as early as half an hour after entrapment. It's critical that he gets medical treatment before his legs are released, or his vital organs could shut down. Saisakai Shiga Hospital is 70 kilometers from the crash site, home base for a remarkable medical specialist, Dr. Takanobu Hase. He and his team are prepared to treat conditions such as crush syndrome. They work right at the crash site while patients are still trapped.
As much as we have room for it. It's good to prevent hypovolemic shock. Well, make sure we have enough.
His second in command, Dr. Shinji Akatomi, has heard that there are already many rescuers at the site. Even so, he knows this kind of disaster calls for experts who know how to work in confined spaces. The key is to get to the crash site in time.
コンファイスペースメディスン、いわゆる瓦礫の下の医療が必要な救助者がいる。
I believe that the rescuers would need us, that we'd be able to help them.
Meanwhile, Momoko Suzuki tries to find out if any family members were on board train number 5418.
Checking to see that Masashi is in the office. I'm watching the news about her.
I worried if my husband had made it to work. I called his office and they told me he's in. I was relieved. But then I thought, maybe Junko is on that train.
Momoko's daughter Junko is a 30-year-old artist. She takes this train 5 times a week to get to a design course at a nearby technical school. Momoko calls Junko's mobile phone. She prays it will be answered. The team from Saisakai Shiga Hospital races the 70 kilometers to the crash site. Dr. Takanobu Hase has years of experience in emergency medicine. The massive Kobe earthquake of 1995 was a turning point in his career. Hase was shocked to see many people die in the days following the quake because they didn't receive on-site treatment for crush syndrome. Ever since then, he's taken a special interest in confined space medicine. The team uses this time to mentally prepare themselves for the tasks that lie ahead. Dr. Hase reminds his team to give the trapped passengers fluid resuscitation before they are released. He reminds them if they get it wrong, people will die.
Before they are released. Okay?
A young intern, Hiroaki Nagata, has joined the team. He's never set foot on a disaster site before.
私はその現場が初めてでしたので。
It was my first time, so I was just going to do exactly as the senior doctors ordered. At the time, I had no idea what I could do for anyone. I was very nervous. Very nervous.
The senior doctors offer encouragement.
永田先生に伝えたかったことは
I told Dr. Nagata that at the disaster site everybody will be agitated and rushing around. I said that we have to prepare ourselves to be calm. That's what I told him.
慣れる自分を作らなければいけないということは伝えました。
At the crash site, passengers are still trapped in the wreckage of the first two carriages. The rescuers run out of stretchers to move the wounded. A few survivors are trapped so deep in the rubble that the rescuers won't even discover them for several hours. One of them is a 19-year-old student who had been standing at the front of carriage number 1. The crash hurled him forward into the driver's cabin. The young man is trapped alongside the dead driver, pinned from the waist down. His limbs are under terrible pressure. He's conscious enough to make contact with his family. He tells them that he may not live long enough to be rescued.
Don't give up. Just hold on. Hang in there.
Further back in carriage number 1, Kyoichi Yoshida fights his fear and pain by encouraging the person next to him.
Hello?
I was holding somebody's hand for quite some time. My mental state was not normal. It took a long time to realize that the person whose hand I was holding had already passed away.
This morning, Yoshida changed his routine. Instead of riding at the back of the train, as he normally did, he sat in the very front carriage. Car number 1 is the most mangled of the train's 7 carriages.
It was really, really painful. I was so preoccupied by the pain that there was no room left to think about how am I going to survive.
Momoko Suzuki calls other family members to see if they have heard from Junko.
But there's no answer.
She learns that Junko was in touch with her sister earlier that morning.
That day the accident happened, on the 25th, I had to leave home before Junko. I usually leave home at 7:20. It had never happened before, but Junko got up and came downstairs, still in pajamas, and she said, She said goodbye, and she said goodbye again. I was wearing shoes already, and I remember I was wondering, why is she saying goodbye twice today? That was the only conversation we had that morning. There was a long weekend approaching, so my daughters had been exchanging text messages about having some dinner party. They were exchanging messages at the time, and suddenly it was cut off. It made me realize she was most probably on that train, and I started to feel very panicky.
By now, emergency workers have ferried more than 400 injured passengers to hospital. At the disaster site, they are now concentrating on body recovery. After fighting traffic and roadblocks, Dr. Hase's team finally arrives. They hope they haven't arrived too late.
The first thing I saw was a horrendous sight. This huge train bent into a V shape, hanging from the apartment building. It was a much bigger accident than we'd imagined.
As they approach the wreckage, team members check victims for vital signs. All are dead. But Hase's team know from experience that there might still be survivors inside.
Four hours had already passed since the accident, but things were still chaotic. If anyone was still trapped inside, they'd need confined space medicine. Also, rescuers might have been injured in secondary accidents. That's what I had in mind when we arrived at the site.
Inside carriage number 1, emergency workers have removed some of the bodies. But they cannot release Yoshida. Crush syndrome is now a real risk. When muscles are under intense pressure, the damaged cells disintegrate. If the pressure is released, potassium and a protein called myoglobin flood through the bloodstream. Elevated myoglobin levels can cause acute kidney failure, and increased potassium concentration can lead to cardiac arrest. Without Dr. Hase's help, Yoshida could die.
Doctor! We need a doctor!
As Dr. Hase's team enters the destroyed parking garage, they are stunned by the destruction around them.
The first carriage of the train was crushed into the parking space of the apartment building. We went in there. I remember it was very hot and smelled of gas, because fuel was leaking from the cars in the parking space.
すごくガソリンが漏れてガソリン臭かったということと、あともう鉄筋が
Reinforcement steel was exposed, and there was shattered glass everywhere. Iron frames were bent and the edges were as sharp as knives. I felt it was very dangerous as soon as I entered. It looked like all those things could fall on you at any time. Also, evaporated gasoline could catch fire and explode at any moment.
いつ爆発するかわからないような状況だというふうに判断しました。
Inside the demolished car park, there is not enough oxygen and too much carbon monoxide. A toxic combination. In this confined space, rescuers also risk contamination and infection from the blood and other body fluids of the victims. The temperature inside the wreckage is hit 40 degrees Celsius. But Dr. Hase and his team persist, carefully checking vital signs of each body in their path. Finally, Dr. Hase comes face to face with Kyoichi Yoshida.
I recognized him as a doctor the moment I saw him. And I thought, oh, the doctor has arrived. He was providing triage very prudently, taking so much time to make sure. I'd never met a single doctor who first introduced himself, so I was very surprised, and at the same time, I was deeply moved by it.
Dr. Hase realizes Yoshida's leg is trapped and under great pressure.
長谷先生は吉田さんにアプローチしたときに
When Dr. Hase approached Mr. Yoshida, he assessed what kind of situation Yoshida was in. His legs were trapped, and he was starting to feel numb. Dr. Hase was thinking about crush syndrome.
クラッシュシンドロームを考えたみたいです。
Hase knows that Kyoichi Yoshida needs to be put on an intravenous drip right away. But Yoshida is confused by pain, shock, and stress, so he doesn't understand why he needs this kind of treatment. The doctor explains that intravenous fluids will help prevent crush syndrome and possibly save Yoshida's life.
He first told me something like, I am cutting your clothes. Even though my clothes at the time were all crumpled up and torn, he excused himself first, before using the scissors. And I was so touched by how polite he was.
The intravenous fluids help flush out the myoglobin and potassium that will otherwise flood into the bloodstream as soon as his leg is released. The treatment will help prevent kidney and heart failure. Fluid resuscitation also reduces the possibility that he will go into shock once released. Momoko Suzuki has called all the local hospitals. Her daughter Junko isn't at any of them.
Type B blood type.
Fearing the worst, she tries the last place any parent wants to visit.
Have you seen anyone like that here?
I called many hospitals, but I couldn't get information about Junko from any of them. So I realized there's a possibility that Junko is already dead and at the morgue. We were not allowed to go into the actual morgue to see the bodies. We had to wait in a room, and if there was a positive identification, then we could go into the morgue. There were Polaroid photos of the dead people that I had to go through to check if Junko was among them.
At the crash site, rescuers are still finding victims. More than 5 hours after the accident, they discover a young woman deep inside carriage number 2 who matches Momoko's description of her daughter Junko. Dr. Hase's intravenous treatment has dramatically increased Yoshida's chances of survival. But 5 hours after the crash, his left leg still remains completely trapped.
And I was thinking, if the inside of my body was damaged, drinking water could cause problems. But I couldn't stand it, so I took some water. And also, it was unbelievably humid, so I asked them to pour the water from their bottles over my head.
The pain is excruciating, but it will now be less risky to release him from the wreckage.
Although there was no guarantee that my left leg could be pulled out of the rubble, I felt relieved somehow. The left leg was so hard to pull out that someone, I think it was the leader of the rescue team, said, if this situation doesn't change, it's not looking good.
The rescuers are having a hard time figuring out which foot is Yoshida's. Tangled in the mountain of rubble with his left leg are the limbs of dead bodies.
They asked me many times, is this it? Is this it? While they were tapping shoes. But I couldn't feel anything. I actually thought that my shoe was being tapped, but that my foot might be partially dead. I was worried.
Yoshida wants to call his family, but can't find his phone.
So I put my hand in my pocket, and there was no phone. Then I realized that I was holding the phone in my left hand at the moment of the accident, and that it must have been thrown somewhere. I thought about asking the rescuers to lend me their phone, but it didn't seem that my left leg was going to be released. It occurred to me to call my family, to let them hear my voice and let them know I was still alive. But then I also thought that if I didn't pull through, they might be devastated, so I decided to call them after I was released.
Yes! Yes!
After 10 minutes, the rescuers have finally identified Yoshida's foot. As his leg is released from the crushing pressure, Yoshida experiences a strange sensation.
I felt a strong pounding in my leg. The condition was such that I didn't even know if the information from the tip of my foot would be going from here or come back to here. I couldn't actually feel whether my leg had been released or not.
I'm gonna roll him over gently.
Blood rushes into his left leg, which increases the risk that Yoshida will go into shock. Meanwhile, other rescuers working in a different part of the wreckage have finally managed to free Junko Suzuki. They ease her out of the rubble of carriage number 2 and bring her motionless body to Dr. Akitomi. He checks for any signs of life.
Miss Junko arrived in front of me. I was surprised because she was covered in oil and I couldn't tell whether she was breathing or whether her heart was beating. I opened her mouth a bit and found it was filled with tiny pieces of glass. I did not have any equipment with me. I just had 2 ballpoint pens. I put one of them between her tightly closed teeth and forced her mouth open. Then, using the other pen, I removed the glass from her mouth.
Dr. Akitomi tries to get any kind of response from Junko. His efforts fail. He realizes she's in a coma.
Her level of consciousness was very low, and there was the possibility of head injury. Also, her blood pressure was very weak.
Junko is also in shock because there isn't enough blood and oxygen flowing to her brain, heart, kidneys, and liver. So these organs are in danger of shutting down. Dr. Hase and Dr. Akitomi ride in the ambulance with Junko, fighting to keep her alive.
This could be touch and go. Damn. She's really hanging in. She stopped breathing.
Her consciousness level dropped dramatically. It was a bad situation. Dr. Hase quickly gave her mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, and I went to get a breathing aid.
Okay. Got it from here. All right.
Dr. Hase was someone I really respected. He was very understanding. And he was my mentor.
Dr. Hase manages to revive Junko. Her condition is so critical that her only hope is an airlift to hospital. Dr. Akitomi and Dr. Hase decide they must take the journey with her. As rescuers lift Yoshida out of his prison and into the light of day, he's overcome by a flood of conflicting emotions.
I was moved, not just because my legs were released, but also because the rescue people were working so hard. It took 5 hours and I was finally taken outside. I was so grateful to my rescuers that I ended up having tears in my eyes. I actually felt like staying there a little bit longer. That's how much we bonded in that small space. It was a real, special atmosphere.
Thank you so much.
It was really cold, and I started to have a chill.
Yoshida is suffering from shock. There is also still a chance of crush syndrome. Even though he was treated on site, doctors will have to watch closely for signs of kidney problems in the next few days. By late afternoon, many rescuers have left the accident site, certain that there are no more survivors. But Dr. Hase's team isn't so sure. After they've delivered Junko to hospital, they return to the wreckage.
I'd heard that in other countries, there have been quite a few cases where people were rescued 24 hours, even 48 hours later. I was not sure that any survivors would still be trapped, but I wanted to help in case someone was found alive.
Just after 4 p.m., rescuers hear several voices from the very front of carriage number 1. Among them is the 19-year-old student whose lower body is pinned beside the lifeless driver. He feels pressure in his chest. Breathing is difficult.
Both legs were trapped. He couldn't feel anything, couldn't move his legs at all. When I heard that, I knew there was a chance he would have crush syndrome, that if he did not get treatment for it, he may not survive.
The team's intern, Dr. Hiroaki Nagata, works his way toward the driver's demolished cabin.
It was a very small space. The train was crushed in like that, and there were a lot of dead people, dead bodies. It's not a nice way of saying it, but they looked like bats hanging down.
Dr. Nagata prepares to treat the young man for crush syndrome and encourages him to hang on for a little longer.
そうですね、もうあかんわ言って弱気な発言をされてる時もありましたね。言い方悪いですけど、青か言って。
He actually sometimes said I might just give up. When he said that, I told him don't be a fool. That rescuers are trying to get to him. So until they reach you, until they save you, you can't give up. That's what I told him.
そしたら助かるしいうことを喋りましたね。非常にやりにくかったです。やりにくいけど必要なのでやらなければならないという状況でした。そういう。
It was a very awkward way to be giving treatment. I knew that if I failed to give him IV fluid, he was going to die. So I did my best.
You're gonna make it. It's okay.
Junko's mother has found out that there's a badly injured survivor in Osaka General Hospital who could be Junko.
Are there braces?
I felt my search is over. I have found her.
Junko is still breathing, but only just. Her doctor estimates that her chance of survival is a mere 1%.
The doctor told me that Junko was brought here by helicopter and that there was an emergency operation in her stomach area that they had to do without permission in order to save her life.
Junko has suffered a severe blow to the head. Her brain tissue swelled, creating great pressure inside her skull. This pressure compromises blood flow and oxygen that nourishes the brain. After hours in this condition, it's very likely any damage could be permanent.
一応手術して処置は一応全部するだけのことは処置はしましたから、あとは
They'd done all they could. The doctor told me that we'd have to see what happened over the next 3 days, that there could be brain damage.
脳を打ってるので。
Dr. Hase's team works into the night to help save the lives of several remaining trapped passengers. All are suffering from crush syndrome and need on-site treatment. The young man from the driver's cabin is the last survivor pulled out alive, 22 hours after the crash. In all, 107 passengers died in the crash. 555 have been injured, many severely. Kiyoshi Yoshida's injuries are so serious that he stays in the hospital for more than 2 months. He is deeply moved by the team that volunteered and traveled 70 kilometers to save his life.
If I didn't get treatment, I might have died or ended up on a kidney machine. If I'd been rescued before Dr. Hase treated me, it's likely I would have ended up with crush syndrome. It took 5 hours to rescue me. But that means I was treated by Dr. Hase. There was luck in a very unlucky situation.
He wrote a book about his life and death experience on train number 5418.
It's good of you to stay with me. It's a long day for you.
After the accident, Junko Suzuki lies in a coma for many months. Her family keeps a constant vigil at her bedside.
I couldn't accept the fact that she's going to die. I always had it in my mind that she will be okay and she will regain consciousness.
One day, 6 months after the accident, Junko finally wakes up.
Oh, Junko. Junko, you're awake. Mom here, Junko. Oh, I don't believe it.
今まで頑張って見守ってきて
I was taking care of Junko all the time. I was so happy that I was her mother when she called my name.
病院の人っていうか周りの入院患者に世話をしに来てはった看護師
The nurses at the hospital heard her voice with me. They were actually crying.
看護師さんの方が驚いて
They were so happy for me.
お母さんよかったですねってみんな病室の中でみんなワンワン泣いていました。
Oh, yes, Junko.
Junko did suffer some brain damage, but after intensive rehabilitation, she is back home with her family. She's become something of a national hero. Support has poured in from across Japan.
I was really relieved that I was alive.
杉純子さんが5ヶ月ぶりに意識戻ったっていうことはもう本当に奇跡。
It was a miracle that Junko Suzuki regained her consciousness. A series of miracles.
Dr. Akatomi often goes to visit Junko and her family, even though he now works 3 hours away in Tokyo. Junko's life changed forever the day train number 5418 went off the rails. But she hasn't lost her artistic dreams.
I've got good eyesight, and I've got capable hands, so I would like to find some kind of job using my hands. I want to be an illustrator, or something like that.
しっかりとした絆が結べないまま30年時間が過ぎ
She was my daughter. But for 30 years, we'd never really been that close. I've been given the chance to raise my daughter again. We can actually start again. I feel that.
やっぱり愛ですね。無償の愛っていうの
I've started to notice what love really means.
やっと分かりました。
People doing extraordinary things to help others.
If he didn't do what he did, we would have died.
Heroic acts that have sometimes meant the difference between life and death.
And he was just crying, don't let me die, save me, save me.
Amazing acts of courage.
It was just a natural reaction. This guy needs help.
Captured on dash cams, CCTV, and mobile phones. Incredible stories from the UK.
He put his life at risk just to save me.
And across the world.
Mayday, mayday, mayday.
All the people that assisted with my rescues that day are my heroes.
We genuinely owe our lives to him.
Today on Saved on Camera. In Australia, an experienced bushwalker knows exactly what to do when he gets seriously injured after falling from a waterfall.
The leg had been totally snapped at the ankle. So I grabbed my walking poles, started to use them to splint my leg.
But he's out there alone. No one knows he's there, and he's just lost his only means of getting help.
In putting my phone in my pocket, I missed my pocket and my phone went straight in the creek. I have no way of telling anybody where I am, and now panic starts to rise in me.
In the UK, 2 9-year-old boys are in danger of drowning under Blackpool's Central Pier at the start of the summer holidays, clinging to the razor-sharp girders with all their strength as the waves threaten to engulf them. A brave father of 3 risks his own life to save the boys, but can he reach them on time?
I didn't know where they were. I just could hear them crying. They were just crying, don't let me die, don't let me die, save me, save me.
Can you contact Coast Guard, North West Ambulance? We could see members of the public had already gone into the water. We genuinely believed that day there would be numerous fatalities.
As one of the biggest storms to hit the UK and Ireland brought chaos to a coastal suburb of Dublin.
We'd never seen anything like that here before. There had been warnings on the radio about people swimming and reminding them, please don't.
But one local resident decided to chance it.
I just thought, she's not going in, surely she's not going in.
And off the coast in the UK, a vintage plane with 2 people on board loses power. They're over the sea, but landing in water could be fatal.
Just heard the engine splutter.
Their only chance of survival is to find somewhere to land, and soon.
After the first splutter, then there was a failure, and that was the end of it.
In Queensland, Australia, a bushwalker's hike goes wrong on the side of a waterfall.
I start sliding and I just saw myself cartwheeling down the face of the waterfall.
Having suffered an injured arm and leg, the enormity of his plight soon sinks in.
I live by myself. I've told nobody where I am, and panic starts to rise in me.
Neil Parker was born in England, but raised on the other side of the world when his parents relocated the whole family to Australia. He's a native now, through and through, with a passion for the great outdoors.
I do a lot of off-track walking and go places that nobody else has been to, or very few people have been to.
Neil's sister Dawn, who lives several hours away, has mixed feelings about this particular hobby.
As a family, have always been a bit concerned, but at the same time I know that he has built up his skills and he is really good with taking care of himself. Where he does his bushwalking, there's no internet service, so I just know he's gone in and I know that he's come out.
One Sunday morning, Neil heads off alone on one of his favourite 3-hour hikes.
That day is just the perfect day to be out walking, and feeling really confident that, I'll be out in an hour and a half.
To complete the hike, he needs to scale the side of a waterfall.
I get to the base of what I know is the biggest waterfall on this walk. It's curved, but vertical, but it's got lots of handholds and footholds. I reached the point 2/3 of the way up the waterfall, and I start sliding, looking for grabs, finger grips, jug holds, anything to halt my momentum from sliding. I just saw myself cartwheeling down the face of the waterfall. I've hit the water, I've come to the surface. I start swimming, but one of my legs doesn't seem to be playing the part, and I realised I was badly injured. My leg had been totally snapped at the ankle. So I grabbed my walking poles, started to use them to splint my leg. I looked at my wrist, I had a long sleeve shirt on, but it just felt like it was sprained, so I wasn't overly worried. I got my phone out, turned it on, only to find out I had no range. So I thought I'll put my phone in my pocket and I'll try and make my way 30 or 40 feet down the creek. In putting my phone in my pocket, I missed my pocket and my phone went straight in the creek. I have no way of telling anybody where I am, and now panic starts to rise in me. I live by myself. I've told nobody where I am. The first person that's going to notice I'm missing is my boss Monday morning when I don't turn up for work.
Stranded, with no communication in the middle of the Australian forest, with no one looking for him, things are looking bad.
It's getting dark and I think I now have to find somewhere to bunker down for the night.
Later, Neil's hope of a rescue quickly fades.
This is not the right location for these guys to be able to find me at night, and I'm under deep canopy.
In Blackpool, in the UK, two 9-year-olds are desperately clinging on for life under the pier with the tide rising above their heads. The boys were so far underneath that they couldn't be seen, but luckily for them, a security guard heard their cries and raised the alarm.
CCTV to control. We've had a report from security at Central Pier of 2 young boys in the sea.
Whiskey Alpha 26 acknowledged the last. Could we have patrol start making, please? Central Pier. Can you contact Coast Guard, Northwest Ambulance and RNLI lifeboat, please?
In the police station, Sergeant Matt Walters watched the CCTV footage feed from the town cameras with mounting concern.
The CCTV control room made us aware that they'd had a report from security staff at the pier that there was 2 young boys in difficulty in the sea underneath the pier. It was just impossible to actually see anyone, which obviously made me and my colleagues here really concerned that there was 2 boys weren't going to be getting out of the water that day. It only takes one wave to slam you into that structure and knock you unconscious.
Sergeant Walters can only wait and watch as the emergency services rush to the scene. The boys had been in the water for several minutes, buffeted by the waves, getting colder and colder. One of the people who noticed the unfolding drama was Paul Adams, who was on a day out with his family.
It was the security guards what I saw running down the beach at first. I was like, it's a bit strange. Some of our family members were down at the sea. When they came back, they said, oh, there's 2 boys under the pier, they're stuck. And at this time, one of the security guards had tried going and getting him. He came out and he was just saying it was too rough, he couldn't get to them. I just thought, me being a father as I am, I have to try. Just every now and again you could hear them crying when the waves had died down a little bit. It was something I had to do.
Under the pier, the boys were being thrown against the sharp girders as the sea became rougher and rougher.
You know, the adults were up to sort of chest and neck height at some points, and the waves were going over them. Yeah, we genuinely believed that day there would be numerous fatalities.
After multiple attempts, the security guard had failed to reach the boys. But Paul tried a different approach.
I didn't go swimming in like everyone did first. What I did, I walked in and I was bouncing over the waves till the point where I couldn't do it, where I couldn't touch the floor, and then I had to swim. But I stayed back a little bit and then I went again. I just let the waves die down a little bit to go in further and further every time.
The Coast Guards were on their way, but still hadn't reached the boys. Paul was getting nearer, but time was quickly running out.
I didn't know where they were. I just could hear them crying. And he was just crying, don't let me die, save me, save me.
Hi, you all right? Yeah. Did you have a good day at school? Mm-hmm. What do you want to do? Do you want to make some butties for tomorrow? Yeah. For your packed lunch?
Yeah.
The Kitson family had recently relocated to the seaside town of Blackpool.
We just moved to the area. We're just finding our feet.
And Mum Claire was relieved that the children were adjusting to life here, including 9-year-old Isaac.
Isaac came home from school one evening with a little note asking was he allowed to stay at his friend's house. I was apprehensive because Isaac's never had a sleepover before anywhere, but I was also overjoyed because he obviously had this bond with this little boy. So he was jumping for joy. And then we gave him his tea. I walked him round to his little friend's house. I can't wait, Mum, I can't wait. I'm going to have a sleepover. And I had a little chat with Mum, and I'll see him tomorrow morning.
But the next morning, the children's plans for a fun day out were to take a disturbing turn.
I had a phone call off his friend's mum telling me that She couldn't see the children outside, but not to worry because they are on the bikes and, you know, they'll be back soon. Have they made the way up to me? I hadn't seen them, so I had to say, obviously, no, I haven't seen them, but I'll have a little look at the park, which I did. I went down and had a look. I couldn't find them. As I heard nothing else, presumably everything was fine.
But young Isaac would never forget what was to happen that day.
We wanted to go out and play some football and ride on our bike. We saw these two boys I didn't know my friend did, and he said for us to follow them. I didn't know where I was going, I was just following them.
Isaac and his new friends ended up at the beach, where their games became more dangerous and involved going into the water.
We walked over, we put our feet in up to our shins, and then there was a big wave, and then the wave took me over and then pushed me back out. I couldn't swim and the waves were proper strong.
With both boys unable to swim, they were now stranded and in extreme danger.
We could see members of the public had already gone into the water, wading in the low tide, looking for these boys. It's very brave. Going in the sea at any time, whether the water's calm or rough, is dangerous.
But Paul was determined to save the boys.
It was rough, but I was doing it and I was coming out with all of us.
Isaac and his friend were struggling to hang on any longer as the cold and the buffering took its toll.
I was panicking and I kept on bobbing up and down. 3 seconds down, 2 seconds up, and kept on struggling, feeling like I might die.
Later, Paul knows the boys are minutes away from drowning and he needs to act fast.
And he was just crying, "Don't let me die, don't let me die, save me, save me."
In Ireland, a woman ignores warnings to stay out of the sea during a ferocious storm.
I just thought she was going to just maybe dip her foot in and turn back, but she didn't. She went in.
Prompting a dramatic race to save her. Dublin in Ireland is known for its enchanting coastline, and it's home to Fiona Donnelly and her family.
I moved back from Manhattan and discovered this area, and thankfully met my lovely husband, and we bought this house and we've raised our children here. They go to the local school.
And there's an added bonus to the area.
We have the sea. It's just incredible. Every day the colours are different, the sea is different. I just love watching it, just staring at it, swimming in it. I just love it.
It's also where Dublin lawyer Philip Lee takes his exercise.
I swim every weekend, so I walk down to Sandy Cove. So it's a lovely area to wander with the dogs or with friends. Terribly pretty to look at and it's awe-inspiring. It's lovely.
Both ended up involved in a dramatic rescue during one of the UK and Ireland's recent infamous storms.
Middle of a storm, beast from the east. We'd never seen anything like that here before. There was no cars on the road. There was nobody out. It was a complete shutdown. We'd had a couple of days indoors, but after about 3 days of that, we'd started to get cabin fever, so I suggested we go for a walk.
Not far away, Philip and his family had the same idea.
I wandered down with my daughter Lara and my wife Una down to the 40-foot because I am fascinated by the sea.
The 40-foot is one of Ireland's most famous outdoor swimming spots. It's a headland in Sandy Cove, County Dublin, and it's attracted swimmers there for 250 years.
You will get literally thousands swimming in that same venue, snow or rain or hail. So to see somebody swimming in the very cold weather is not in the least bit unusual.
But with the might of the beast from the east, this was not the day for a dip.
There had been warnings on the radio that morning about people swimming and reminding them, please don't.
As Fiona was about to discover, one lady's radio had clearly been on the blink.
We got as far as the seafront and it was really windy, the sea was crazy, so the kids just wanted to turn back. I decided to go on because I wanted to see, take some photographs, take some videos of the sea. Just out of the corner of my eye, I see a lady starting to walk down towards the water, and I just thought, she's not going in, surely she's not going in. And so I kept filming.
By this stage, Philip's walk had taken him down to the same place.
Saw a woman in the little harbour. And I suddenly saw her move out to the exit of the harbour.
It was obvious, the waves, they were just starting to pull her, and she wasn't strong enough.
Anybody in that sea did not have a possibility of survival.
It was really scary. That lady was in serious danger.
Philip knew he needed to do something.
Immediately I go, let's get a life ring and let's get her. If she can hold a life ring, she can be pulled in against any tide. Swimming, once you're in the maelstrom, you don't have a chance. Two other gentlemen actually had a ring in their hands and they were very close to her and they threw the ring to her then. She couldn't grab that ring, so I then threw the ring immediately because time was going to be critical.
Luckily, this man took over and he moved so quickly.
I threw the ring and the ring landed past her. She was then pulled towards the rope and she grabbed the rope.
It was incredible that he was there at that moment.
Another gentleman also grabbed the rope that I threw, and we both then pulled the rope until she grabbed the ring. So we steadily pulled her in, and then she came in towards the slip. We then got down to the slip, up to her knees, but just make sure she got the last bit and helped her onto the slip. And then she ran, obviously, to get herself warm and dressed.
It was an awful thing to witness, but I'm so glad she was okay.
And with the woman unharmed, for Philip, who had acted so quickly, recognition for his heroics came later that day.
By the time I got home, I then went out for a drink that evening, and total strangers in the pub came up and said, "Oh, are you the person that rescued that woman in the sea?" And I was a bit taken aback by that, but pleasantly taken aback. No one objects to being thanked for doing something.
A vintage airplane is in trouble over the UK coastline with 2 people on board. The engine has stalled and they're falling out of the sky. The pilot needs to make an emergency landing, but the only option is on a beach full of holidaymakers.
So I braced myself and just hoped for the best, but I actually thought, okay, this is where we're going to land.
Zach Rocky is a 47-year-old airplane enthusiast from Devon and has been flying planes for 17 years.
Passion for flying goes back a very, very long time, since literally before I can remember. It's what I'm about. I love it. I love how they work. I love how they operate. I've got to understand how they operate, aerodynamics, what keeps them in the air. And I always knew I was going to fly.
One of Zach's favourite planes is this vintage 1930s French light aircraft.
I love the look of it when it's together. It's a head turner. It's a nice machine to be in. It makes you feel quite good about yourself being inside it, in the military colour scheme as well. It's an open cockpit aircraft, and just to be bimbling around over the Devon countryside, looking out the window, counting swimming pools is wonderful.
Trudy Spiller is also a vintage aviation enthusiast from Devon and has been flying with Zach for 3 years.
I will do any adventure, I will go anywhere and try everything once. Zach normally is quite a wacky, off-the-wall character, full of beans, a joker, just fun to be around. But when he gets into the aeroplane, he's a mature Zach, and you feel safe in his hands, and he's very professional.
The pair had made plans to visit a special vintage air show.
I'd been invited by Bodmin Airfield. There was an event going on down there, and they were marking the end of World War I. Asked if I'd like to go down. I've known Trudy for quite a while, and I phoned her up and said, it's actually going, the weather looks fantastic, I will be taking it there, would you like to come along? And she said, yes, please, let's go and do it. She hadn't had an open cockpit experience before. She really wanted to have that experience and come along for the day.
They set off from their hometown in Branscombe, enjoying the flight in the open cockpit plane.
I was never once nervous. A lot of people will say, no, I'm not going up in one of those. But for me, I didn't think like that.
The conditions were really good, actually. It was the first sunny bank holiday of the year, and it was incredibly sunny throughout the whole weekend. We got really, really lucky with the weather.
So we got the sort of lunchtime and hung out. You literally show off your planes and numerous others, other people with them there. And then we thought, nearing 4 o'clock, we thought we'd decide we'd head on back.
So, after an enjoyable day at the air show, the pair set off on the flight home.
Went on a bit of a scenic trip. Was gently make our way back and taking the whole Jurassic coastline all the way. It was stunning. It was a beautiful flight home.
Everything was well, we were enjoying it.
But things take a dramatic turn on the final stretch of the journey.
Just heard the engine splutter once and thought, okay, he's just slowing down maybe because we're going to have to go up on an incline soon.
I first noticed it, I think, the same time as Trudy did, actually. It was around about as we came around the edge of Budleigh Salterton. I put on more power for the climb out. It didn't do what it was supposed to do. It didn't increase the RPM as I was expecting it to. And then I started to think, though, there's an anomaly here. So I put in full power, and it didn't quite do what I wanted to do. So I backed off of that and just thought it would cruise on. And we did cruise on for a bit of a ways, and then there was a bit of a splutter.
Do you know land on the beach? Explosive.
And then after that, after the first splutter, then there was a failure, and that was the end of it.
Then it cut out completely. It just went silent, and then you're gliding. At that point, I looked back at Zach and said, Zach, in a worried way. He didn't answer.
We couldn't talk to each other, obviously.
There was nothing I could do to help.
At the point of complete failure, the best reaction, and my own instinctive one, which I was quite happy about, is don't panic. That's pretty much the best thing to do at that point. Panicking is not going to help anybody.
It's at this moment that Zach has to make a snap decision. One wrong manoeuvre could end in disaster.
It started spluttering, and I chose somewhere. Then I did what I could, and then when everything failed, I already had a plan. Because getting it wrong can either kill me or somebody on the ground. Inland was not an option. It looked uncomfortable. There was a lot of trees, forestation.
All Zach can do now is head for the nearest strip of land, a beach.
It doesn't sound good, does it?
No, he's landing on the beach.
So I braced myself and just hoped for the best.
But yeah, after some seconds, you see if it's settled quite nicely into its glide. I was like, okay, yeah, I can make this. It was at low tide, so it was a nice sandy area there. Good runway, so to speak. As I got closer, there was a couple of people that I spotted.
I could clearly see there were people on the beach, about a handful, and with that I could see they were looking up to us and coming towards us with their mobile phones on, probably thinking, oh, this is wonderful, they're doing a nice low a flyover or something.
I think I need to...
Wow.
Later, Zach faces one of the biggest challenges in his life when he makes an emergency landing. Meanwhile, Back in Blackpool, in the UK, two boys stranded in the Irish Sea, fighting for their lives and desperately praying for help.
I thought I was strong, but the waves were obviously stronger than me. I was thinking, I'm gonna die.
Then, Isaac made one last effort to save himself as he remembered something his mum had taught him.
She taught me kick your legs and hold on to something.
Luckily, the pier leg was within his grasp.
We grabbed onto the thing what holds the pier up. I told my friend to keep on moving along so there's more people that side so they could try and help.
Spurred on by the boys' cries for help, Paul was all the more determined to get further into the water and to rescue the boys.
I didn't know where they were. I just could hear them crying, and I noticed Isaac being on the outside of the pier, so I got him first. Isaac was holding on to the pier leg, and I said, right, come on, we're going now.
For Isaac, it was looking like his nightmare might be coming to an end.
He picked me up and then brought me along.
Isaac held on to me like he never wanted to let go of me, like. He just couldn't let go of me. He'd held on so tight. When I came out with Isaac, I gave him straight to Paul, who's part of our family.
With Isaac safe, Paul went straight back in to help rescue the other boy.
As I got to the other lad, I had to swim out to him because he was a lot further out. He tried grabbing me straight away, and I'm like, just 1 minute, let me just get my breath. Got my breath, I went, right, come on, we go. But I've come back out and there was someone in the water who took over the second child.
The second man was the security guard who had raised the alarm. The boys had narrowly escaped death because of the bravery of those involved.
Had the security guard not heard the cries for help, had there not been security working that day on the pier, had it been a bit of a quieter day in Blackpool midweek maybe, we genuinely felt from watching the footage that it would have been a different story had them members of the public not acted.
We stayed on the beach for a little bit longer, sat there talking about what had happened, and everyone was like, I can't believe you just done that. I'm like, no, neither can I. It was a few days after it actually hit me that I'd saved 2 boys from drowning. So, yeah, and I actually cried.
In the Australian outback, a bushwalker finds himself in serious trouble after falling from a waterfall.
I was badly injured. My leg had been totally snapped at the ankle.
Worse still, nobody knows he's out there.
Panic starts to rise in me. I've told nobody where I am.
But the alarm was raised when he didn't show up for work the next day, and his sister Dawn received a call.
On the day that I found out that he hadn't turned up for work, I was at work myself, and I knew straight away that something is wrong. The lady beside me at work, I just went up to her and touched her on the arm, and I said, my brother's missing. She took me to the nearest police station. They took all the details. The police helicopter went out, but they didn't find anything. That night, I did feel that maybe he might have died.
The next morning, police handed the search over to Air Rescue, a division of the Queensland Government. Greg Beer was on duty.
He didn't have an emergency locator beacon with him, so we weren't getting any signals. It was really a needle in a haystack.
In the outback, Neil knew he would need to play a part in his own rescue. He had already crawled over 3 kilometres of terrain with a broken leg, but he must push on and find a clearing.
I dragged myself the last 50 metres across the rocks to the gravel road track.
We were 10 minutes from deciding to go back to base and refuel, where our rescue crew officer in the back of the helicopter sighted something. It was Neil, and he had a colourful type jacket. And, amazing that we saw him.
And he flew straight across overhead. And I thought, hallelujah. Elation, I guess still now, it's still a very teary moment to realise that I've been found and all my effort to get to this location has worked.
Time was critical. We set up for the winch then. It was quite a tight area to put our guys into.
When the helicopter came back to load me into the stretcher, and then when the stretcher was taken off and I was in heaven, I thought, wow, I've been rescued, I'm going home.
Neil's ordeal is finally over, and his family received the news they've longed for.
They found him. It's such a relief. We just went straight up to emergency, and straight away someone let us know that he was all good, that he has badly broken his leg and his arm, but she told us that he managed to drag himself to a clearing that was 3 kilometres from where he had fallen. It just blew me away.
And when I woke up, my sisters were there. It was bloody fantastic to see them and be able to give them all a hug and a kiss and thank them all for being there.
Back in the UK, Zach Rocky and his friend Trudy had been on their way back home when their vintage aircraft suddenly lost power.
Heard the engine splutter.
Time has run out and they can't avoid an emergency landing.
Something wrong. People, you better clear the beach.
But they're heading towards the beach and a difficult approach.
So it was a sudden bang and then boom, boom, boom along some other rocks and the sand.
The left wingtip's very, very close to the pebbles, a lot closer than I thought it was going to be.
Wow!
Touched the left wheel down first because it was a real steep slope, and that really sunk into the stones. It's almost like a quickstones instead of quicksand. I wondered initially whether it was going to grab the wheels and flip us over. Massively adrenaline at that point.
And when we'd actually landed, I think that's when it all hit home. What I'd perhaps been through was the enormity of it.
I was bizarrely unfazed. And then getting out after, sort of got a bit of jelly legs. I was like, oh my God. Judy and I walked back up the landing to get away from people to the point of touchdown, almost kissed the ground. Thanks for letting me back on.
People on the beach are quick to alert the Coast Guard, and station manager Terry Waugh is the one who took the call.
Our initial tasking came in as a ditched aircraft on Jacob's Ladder Beach, and that's all we had to start with. It is very vague. You're thinking all the way down, I think, oh, what are we doing? Have they crashed? Are there injuries? Until you get there, you don't actually know what you've got. I could see with binoculars that the 2 people were out of the aircraft. That was great. The aircraft was still in one piece and upright, which is something we didn't know about until we got there. It could have been upside down. Check that there's no injuries as such. Also checking for shock. The pilot seemed fine, but the passenger was a bit quiet. So we just talked to the passenger, make sure she's okay. If the tide had been in, he wouldn't have been able to get down onto the beach. There wouldn't have been enough room. If it had been midsummer, there would have been too many people on the beach. He wouldn't have come down then. Probably his only option would have been to ditch in the sea. The incident could have turned bad very quickly. If he ditched in the sea, there would have been injuries, possible fatalities.
What started out as a fun day out for a pair of aviation enthusiasts ended up in a major rescue operation that could have been so much worse.
I think I've since realised how precious life is and every day matters. Never been in danger before, so this is the first, hopefully last experience.
When you go to an incident and you get a good outcome like that, nobody's injured, it's a good feeling.
The availability of the beach was literally still wind. We could not have put together a better scenario for it to have gone wrong. We got lucky.
Thankfully, no one was injured, and even the plane survived intact. Today, 6 months after their crash landing, Trudy and Zach meet up with Terry the Coast Guard, who rescued them off the beach.
Terry.
How are you?
Terry, nice to see you again. You too, sir, you too. Remember Trudy?
How are you?
Yeah.
That day?
I can remember. I don't think I'll ever forget it.
Was you expecting to see this sort of an aeroplane there?
No, but
there you go, yeah.
When you see a plane, I think, oh my God, we got a passenger airline.
That's right, yeah,
on the beach.
Yeah, quite.
Amazing bit of flying. Because you wouldn't have known until you got down level with the beach, the sort of slope on the beach, would you?
No, I was hoping for the sand. I was aiming for the sand.
Right.
That was the flattest part.
Yeah.
But the 4 or 5 people that were there, they went to the shoreline. So it was like, I can't do that anymore. Stones. But yeah, we got away with that one. Beach wheels, that's what I call them from now on. I do. Yeah, there's not many aircraft I think I could have actually made that with, apart from this one. In fairness,
right.
Yeah, some of the other things I've flown, they weren't going to manage that, not at all.
When I heard the engine cut out, that was all. That's when I knew that wasn't right, you know, and the spluttering. So, you know, I sat there, and not at any point did I think, oh, this is it, I'm going to die. I knew Zach would get it down. I really kind of phased out, and that was my first experience of shock, probably.
Yeah, it's like you said, you were in shock. You just wanted to sit down, and everything comes flooding back to you, what you've just done and what you've just been in.
Yeah, and I was shaking. And when I first I went on a flight again with Zach, that stomach, the feeling came back, to be honest.
Yeah.
Are you having fun, though?
Oh, fun.
And she went over and touched the airplane and gave it a little stroke. And I even said I offered her if she wanted to go flying again. I think she might do. She might do, in this aeroplane.
Maybe one day I'll sit in as a passenger again.
Earlier, we saw 9-year-old Isaac saved from drowning under Blackpool's Central Pier. Now fully recovered, Isaac and his mum have forged a bond with Paul, the man who carried him to safety.
Hey up.
Hi, Paul.
And they meet up on a regular basis.
All right.
You good?
Yeah.
You all right, yeah?
Yeah.
Good.
How are you doing?
Bit mad being back here.
Yeah, but it feels strange, doesn't it?
It does a little bit, yeah.
Well, if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be sitting here with Isaac.
Yeah.
I think it was a brave thing you did, risking your own life when you've got your own family. You know, you just went in and got them, and I can't thank you enough for doing that. That's going above and beyond.
Main thing was getting you out.
Yeah.
I can't sort of comprehend the fear that obviously the children must have been going through, and the relief when they saw you, you know, coming in for them.
The sound of the children crying, it
was enough to prompt you to go in for them.
You could tell they were scared when I got to them, they wouldn't let go, and all they kept saying is, don't let me die, and stuff like that, and I weren't planning to. Like, looking down now and seeing children in the water, the parents are nearby, but they don't understand how quick the tide comes in. That day the tide came in so quick, it was unreal. You think a little bit more about if I couldn't have got to them, what would have happened, and then I went through a point where I was thinking, perhaps I might not come back out. There'd been 3 of us.
Very scary.
How do you feel about being down here?
It's alright, but I'm still got a fear of the water. But
It'll take time, but
yeah.
just a little bit at each time, innit?
Yeah. Thank you for saving me.
You're welcome. Just don't go playing in the sea.
I don't think he's going to play in the sea again, are you? Hey.
An extraordinary decision taken in a split second on Blackpool Beach by Paul changed the fate of 2 little boys forever.
I'd never done anything like this before or anything like that. It's not like something like I'm a superhero or anything like that. It's actually hit me a little bit talking about it that it were that close to, if I weren't there, they wouldn't be here now.
Overwhelming, grateful, emotional to the man that pulled Isaac out, and thankful that I can spend the rest of my life now with my son.
Paul's heroic actions on that day mean all 3 now share a bond that will last a lifetime.